Good afternoon. I would like to call to order the February 9th, 2026 Lake Washington School Board Study Session. Let the record reflect that all board members are present and we have all of our student representatives in attendance. Tonight we have one topic on the agenda, which is policy development for OE10, which is our learning environment policy, and specifically student feedback on OE10. Dr. Holman.
Yes, learning environment and treatment of students. And so last year the board decided to engage in some work related to OE10, rewrote the policy. That took, I'll say, a period of time, and the board knew that some additional feedback would be helpful as we enter into the kind of finalization of the policy, superintendent's interpretation, and indicators of compliance. One of the aspects the board knew would be of high interest is student feedback, particularly given that this is directly impacting our students each and every day. And so the student reps were commissioned to go find some student voice, and they have done a tremendous job of being thoughtful, I think learning through this process, and bringing back to the board feedback related to some very key questions that they engaged with peers regarding, so that we can take policy development into the next phase. And so tonight we have, yes, all four of our student reps, but we also have some additional guests here as well that really did help partner with the students to conduct this engagement well, to conduct thorough. And then how do you package something like this to be able to report back to the board of directors? And so I'm going to hand this over to Director Johnny Fu, let him introduce our guests, the topic, and then hand it over to our students.
Thank you, Dr. Holman. What an incredible journey it's been around OE10, particularly about student voice and student feedback. I really just want to thank the board for this opportunity, because I know that it's not easy to have student reps on the board and to think about the buildup that it takes to have students actually insert their voice and feel empowered. I know it's been years in development, so I thank you for having student board reps, and then also the opportunity for them to really go out and demonstrate some leadership. I also want to just thank the student board rep themselves. And you spent over 40 hours on this work, and you gave up weekends, you gave up weeknights, you even gave up parts of your winter break to do this work. And it showed in your commitment, your passion around bringing to light student experiences that helps our district, highlights what's great about our district, and highlights areas in which we can improve. And I'll speak for Miss Adana and Mr. Sergio and Miss Andra that we're really, really proud of the work that you put in, and thank you for your energy and effort towards this. With further ado, I'm going to let the students now take the lead and introduce themselves.
Okay, we'll introduce ourselves now. Hi, my name is Sarah. I'm a junior at Redmond High School, as well as a student representative for the east side of the school district. And I just wanted to say thank you to Director Fu and his team for making us feel so supported throughout this entire project. They put in so much time. They put in time over the weekends. They worked with us over breaks. They visited us during the school time. And I just wanted to say I feel very supported through this entire process, and I just want to say thank you.
Hello, I'm Hamsini, and I'm currently a junior at Emerson K-12, and I'm the student board representative for the West Side. And I would just like to say that during my work with OE10, I really appreciated the courage that students had to speak out about issues that were both related to them and the issues they see affecting their peers.
Hi, my name is James. I'm a senior at Lake Washington High School, and I represent the west side of this district. I really appreciate this opportunity, not just to do work on OE10, but also just to be on this board and have a voice in district decisions. It's something that I'm really privileged to have. And I just also have to just thank Director Fu Ms. Adana, Mr. Sergio, and Dr. Peter for all their help and support throughout this process.
Hi, I'm Suneri. I'm a senior from Eastlake High School, and I represent the east side of the district. I wanted to say thank you to Director Fu, Ms. Adana, and Mr. Sergio, and then also Dr. Peter, who's not here today. They put a lot of effort into this process. They had almost every snack we ever requested at every meeting. Yeah, so already that set us up for success. Along with that, I don't know how many students are watching, but I just wanted to say thank you to all the students at the listening sessions. I think one of our biggest fears going into the listening sessions were that students wouldn't want to share with us or they wouldn't be genuine. And I think going through so many of them, it was really amazing to see like how genuine they were with their concerns and how much faith they put in us to share their perspectives. So.
Okay, now without further ado, let's begin our presentation. So, Lake Washington School District is one of the largest as well as one of the most diverse districts within our state. As student representatives, it is our job to be a voice for every student within the district. The four of us do come from very different backgrounds, and we bring a variety of different perspectives to the board meetings. However, there's only four of us, and last year we acknowledged that there was no way four students relying on just their experiences could possibly speak for all 30,000 diverse students that make up this district. And so we decided to embark on a journey to become better student representatives, and we found ourselves working closely with the Department of Student Excellence as we explored both OE10 as well as the vast experiences that made up the student body. Now for the agenda. First, we're going to be going over the role of student voice within OE10. Then we're going to be going over Hart's Ladder and what that has to do with OE10. Then we'll go over how we formulated the listening sessions, as well as the observations we got from the listening sessions, and then the recommendations we formulated based on these observations. So what is OE10? Let's go to the next slide. OE10 is an operational expectation centered around the student learning experience and learning environment. And what better way to measure the effectiveness of these policies that are so connected to the student experience than to just ask the students themselves? I'll hand it over to James for Hart's Ladder.
We want to present Hart's Ladder as a framework that's widely accepted, and it quantifies the level of student voice within districts or organization, because when we think about student voice, there's so many different things that like student voice can mean, and so many different levels that can represent, because student voice can be very empowering, but at the same time it can be just for show, or as we'll see the next slide, just for manipulation, tokenism, and decoration. And so we really want to move away from these first three rungs in Hart's Ladder and up to a higher rung from 4 to 8. And if you open your packet, we also have descriptions of Hart's Ladder and a deeper explanation of what each level represents and the experiences we can expect from each level and how students are included.
Yeah, so building off James, I'm just going to summarize what each of the rungs are. You have the packet in case you want to look in greater detail later. But like James said, Hart's Ladder is essentially a framework to define the level of student voice in different organizations or districts. So the first three are manipulation, tokenism, and decoration. And essentially this encompasses when students either aren't aware of the issues affecting them or the policies that make up the organization. They're asked for their opinion, but their opinion isn't used in any decision-making or in any meaningful way. Or we conduct things like listening sessions or panels, but it's mainly for decoration in order to show that we have student voice without actually using it in a meaningful way to shape our district. So we don't want to be in any of the first three rungs. Rungs 4 through 8 are increasing levels of student voice, with rung 8 being the ideal standard of the level of student voice in different organizations. So we start out with asking students for their voice through administration, and then the students provide their feedback in a way that administration defines, and they're informed of the issues going on. And slowly, as we ascend the ladder, we get to a place where youth initiates the changes that are made, sharing their opinions, and the decision-making process surrounding these policies becomes a collaborative process with adults rather than one started by and directed by adults.
So we first wanted to talk about the process of the listening sessions to understand where we got our findings. So this is the student profile and the demographics that we asked school administrators and to bring together, and each student having their own unique background. We intentionally wanted students who don't often have a voice or in leadership positions. For the environment, we also wanted to create a safe and comfortable space for the students and make sure they understood the purpose of the listening session. We wanted to ensure that they had a safe space and environment that was comfortable and non-pressuring for students to freely express themselves and talk about their opinion. If they didn't have anything to say, then we told them that's okay. We let the students know that their opinion mattered. We also let students know that an adult would be taking notes and would remain confidential to create a safe environment. So here are the schools that we went to. The purpose of why we chose these schools is because we wanted to get a good understanding from the 4 comprehensive high schools in our school district, but we also wanted to make sure that our choice schools had a voice in it too, because they have their own unique experience and environment. So here's kind of the timeline of when we visited the schools. We went through some challenges, but we got through them. For example, like the WASDA conference, our own very busy schedules, and student availability. We still were able to find a way to make it work, and we're happy to present the students' stories and our findings. So before interviewing students, we spent some time together as a group to make sense of the OE10 policy. And here are some of the themes that we found, like student voice, community was something that all students spoke about naturally, school culture, and supportive environments. Students shared what worked for them and what didn't work for them. These were the themes that we formed questions around and found in conversations with students. Just a reminder, the full list of questions are in your folders. One major theme that I mentioned was community. Here's an example of a question we asked the students. A highlight that is that students talked about peer groups, clubs, and after-school activities. Another theme that I mentioned was learning environments, and here's an example of a question we asked the students. A frequent topic that students talked about were miscellaneous policies within their own schools. Another theme that I mentioned was student relationships. Here's an example of a question we asked the students. Overall, students mentioned coaches, club advisors, and teachers. Students were able to mention a trusted adult in the building. Finally, the last theme is student engagement and culture. Here's an example of questions we asked the students. Some topics that students mentioned were workload, school environment, and teacher engagement. After our valuable conversations we had with students and compiling the data, here's the process we followed. First, we read through all the data, understanding each student's view. Second, we categorized the data and reviewed major themes. Lastly, we classified the data within themes related to OE10. We made sure to understand the material, which took us about 10 hours of work.
After we sorted through the data, a couple very clear themes started to emerge. These themes being community, miscellaneous policies, overwhelming schedules/workload, physical environments, and then racism and bullying. And let me just preface this by saying that all the quotes on the screen, as well as throughout the rest of this presentation, are real quotes said by students during the listening sessions. So we started the listening sessions by asking questions about community, and Humsini did go over some of these questions, but just again, these questions included things like, do you have a trusted adult or a person that you can turn to at the school? Is there a group of people or at least one person that you feel like you really belong with at the school? Positively, Throughout every listening session, generally the students said that they felt like they belonged both at their school and within the clubs or the other groups at their school. However, students at both the comprehensive schools as well as the choice schools reported that on a district level they were unsatisfied with how their voice was being heard, and they felt that even if they did reach out to the district, no change would occur. However, smaller schools especially thought that their voice would be drowned out by the other schools since they had less say on the district level because they were smaller. So now, miscellaneous policies. Across the schools, there were many miscellaneous policies that were brought up. This included district-wide policies like the schedule change, as well as more school-specific ones like the tardy policy. Surprisingly enough, when students brought up these policies, even when they felt a strong dislike, they still made sure to see both sides. They understood that they wanted change, yet they also knew that the policies were implemented in the first place for a reason, and they wanted to see both the side of the district as well as their own. Also, more than being upset about the policies, the students were upset that their voices hadn't been taken into account during the creation of these policies. They felt that they could have contributed many ideas that felt both reasonable to them as well as to the district. Let's leave these up for a second so you can read the quotes. Across all of the schools that we went to, students felt that the schoolwork was overwhelming. This was a sentiment shared not only by students who had major commitments after school, for example, a job or siblings they had to take care of, but instead the vast majority of students we spoke to.
Physical environment was another theme that was brought up multiple times, and at least to me, it was a little bit surprising because when I think about learning environment, I think about the classroom. But in reality, it goes beyond just like the classroom and the actual physical environment and how we're creating a space for these students to really be able to learn. We heard testimonies from students that there were parts of their school that weren't kept very well. And so it felt like to them that they couldn't take pride in their school, and especially when they had teams from away teams from other schools or from other school districts come to their school, they really didn't have the sense of pride or the sense of community, and they felt embarrassed of their school because of areas that might have been not kept well or might have been dirty. There's also a large theme surrounding the bathroom issue, where students would often hold in to not go to the bathroom, wait until they get home, go off campus, go during lunch, not go during school hours, because they felt uncomfortable going during school hours, going when there were other students in the bathroom, or when the bathrooms were dirty or not accessible to use. They often kept it in, and really how you're supposed to focus on learning if you're really focused on going to the bathroom. We also heard a very empowering story from a student who needed a wheelchair for mobility, where they couldn't access the school they were going to. They couldn't have access to the education simply because of a physical barrier that prevented them from entering the school. And we heard from them that they made multiple attempts to reach out to school officials, and advocate for their change. And just the overburdening amount of effort that they had to use to go into this physical environment change, we really want to address in our recommendations and make sure that the environment is dignified and accessible for everyone.
The next theme that we noticed was racism and bullying. Unfortunately, this was a theme that came up very often during our listening sessions, and we just want to preface this topic by saying that none of the questions we asked were directly based on racism or bullying, but rather a number of students chose to bring it up on their own. Additionally, none of the students we picked were based off the criteria of having previously experienced racism or bullying, but rather they were based off the criteria we showed you earlier, where they were from marginalized communities or spaces in the district that they didn't necessarily have leadership. And we found that within these communities, conversations of racism and bullying came up much more often than we had previously expected. We've split it up into 2 slides just because there are so many quotes surrounding these issues, so I'll give you a moment to read the quotes before I talk about it. Okay. Surprisingly, or not surprisingly, one of the biggest questions this issue came up was when we were asking about chronic absenteeism, which we know the district has been targeting a lot. And many students said that the reason they were absent so much was because they didn't feel accepted by their peers, or they even felt unsafe sometimes if major events had happened regarding their identity, that afterwards they would come to school and hear students make jokes about violence based on their identity. Additionally, students across schools feel that increasingly, especially this year and last year, slurs have become commonplace in school culture. And when they report these racist remarks to teachers, while teachers understand and care and do the best they can to report it to admin, many of these remarks go unresolved, often empowering bullies or students who make these remarks to normalize them further because they feel they won't get in trouble for it. We find that students have this problem particularly with admin, and this might be because they don't have enough or as much interaction with them on a day-to-day basis as they do teachers, but they just feel in general that because such little, not action is being taken, but they see such little results of maybe the action that's being taken behind the scenes towards racism, it further creates this culture of saying slurs in schools or making off-color jokes. And normalizing that.
Yeah, and adding on to scenario, bullying was another big issue that we encountered in our listening sessions, and we want to acknowledge that bullying and racism are not just rampant in Lake Washington School District. This is a nationwide issue, nationwide school, and not just even in school, but outside of schools too. And so we have quotes on the screen that show the effects of bullying and the testimonies that we heard. And what we heard was very empowering and honestly surprising. We heard from students that there were multiple students that they knew who had to drop out of school or even committed suicide because they were getting bullied so much during their time in high school. There were students that felt like they had to choose between coming to school or taking a hit to their mental health or degrading their mental health. And this is not a choice that students should be making. And students also reported that the process, like Suneri said earlier about racism, for reporting bullying often left it unresolved, often left the issue unresolved. The testimonies that we heard from students was that they knew and reported the incidents of bullying that they experienced to the school admin, but they'd often been redirected, or even if they were investigating this incident, they testified or told us that when the administration would ask the person or the bully in question, it would just be, did you bully this person? And if they answered no, then there's not much that the admin could really do or the school officials could do. So in their mind, they reported to us that it kind of encouraged them to bully more and encouraged the behavior because they weren't really being discouraged to.
Can I interrupt for a second? I just got some feedback that if you're not speaking for our students, can you make sure to put mute on your mic? The feedback on the internet's not the greatest.
Adding on to James, we wanted to share the story of one particular student we heard who said that she had reported the same person bullying her more than 5 times, and not only had this person bullied her, but they bullied her friends and other people she knew in classes who had all reported it as well. But because there was no centralized way to keep track of someone who's a repeat offender, along with the investigation process largely being asking someone if they bullied the person, and when they say no, saying there's nothing more we can do, this person kept bullying that student over and over again, and to this day goes unresolved. So we felt that was a very impactful story in showing the scale of bullying that takes place, but also highlighting the first quote on the slide, which says that you lose hope in terms of what to do. Because I feel like being in the district personally, since 2nd grade, I've always been told that you can go to a trusted adult whenever you're being bullied, and that's the first thing I'm told. But when that trusted adult doesn't have the power to do anything further than listen to my concerns, it feels very hopeless. We'd like to go on to our recommendations that we made based on the themes we noticed and that we just talked about. So these recommendations are for almost all of the OE10 sub-policies, and in the following slides, we'll show the original policy language, and then in red will be our changes to the policy language that we're suggesting, as well as the reasoning behind the changes we're making and the operational impacts we hope to see based on our suggested changes. So for 10.1, the policy is ensure cultivation of learning environments that exhibit positive relationships between students and with staff, a sense of belonging for all students, culturally responsive practices, and positive conflict resolution practices. The main change we chose to make on this slide was revising Indicator 4, which originally said, student focus group or qualitative feedback confirms positive relationships and belonging, to say, qualitative feedback from focus groups of students, especially those previously reporting identity-based harm and/or bullying across district regions and ages, report significant growth in experiencing positive relationships and belonging at their school. Going into the reasoning for this change, we felt that the original indicator's broad language left room for varied interpretation and implementation. And the last thing we would want is for the board or someone reviewing the reports to feel we're in compliance for this, when in reality there's many gaps in the system at the student level. So by specifying the scope, target participants, and measurable outcomes, we hope that this revised indicator can provide some clearer implementation guidance and also provide guidelines to maintain meaningful levels of accountability. And the specificity also ensures consistent application across the district and centers the experience of the students who are most affected by the challenges this policy addresses. Operationally, we hope that this looks like frequent student engagement across the district addressing these topics, especially because several students reported feeling like they're not engaged often enough on their experience with bullying or how they feel it should be handled. And we think it's a top priority issue right now among students, is feeling belonging and feeling like they have someone to talk to cultivate these positive relationships.
Moving on to 10.2, which is surrounding ensure a culture of learning by teaching effective strategies, providing opportunities for students to take ownership of their work, and offering high levels of consistent support. When we read this policy, we wanted to acknowledge that on top of what the interpretation says of effort, reflection, and persistence as a culture of learning, what we heard from students was that a culture of learning is more than maybe those three definitions, and extends to including promoting proactive behaviors, intellectual risk-taking, and creating spaces where effective collaboration is central. And we reflected this change in interpretation in the indicators by adding student perception data on motivation and opportunities for creativity and support. What we heard was that while self-efficacy was an important component, it kind of narrowed down and overlooked other essential elements when we were looking at recommendations for this policy. We wanted a comprehensive culture of learning that also fosters the students' willingness to take intellectual risks, encourage proactive behavior and engagement with challenging material, and develop collaborative skills. By expanding this interpretation and the indicators, what we hope to have is that the district will cultivate a learning environment that develops the full range of skills that we saw from the students and what these students said they needed and wanted for academic growth and real world success. What we saw from students was that when they were asked, or when the conversation went to classes, what was highlighted was that the classes that they really remembered and really stuck in their head were not like the monotonous packets or the tests, but it was the interactive activities and the creativity that they could use through their inspiring and fun and creative projects that went beyond just rote memorization. And so we hope that this impact of these changes will be that classes will provide opportunities for creativity beyond just memorizing the unit or the assignment, and that students will exercise initiative through self-directed projects and inquiry related to course content. We want to frame this around Hart's Ladder and how do we really include student voice in these decisions. And that's one of the impacts we want to have, is to move up those rungs when we frame it in Hart's Ladder.
Going on to sub-policy 10.3, it largely ties into 10.2, which James was just talking about. And originally, the policy language is written as ensuring learning environments are purposeful and equitable in their use of time and supports to maximize learning from all students. As you may remember, one of our biggest themes was students feeling across the board that the schedule and workload is overwhelming, which is why we intentionally chose to add the word manageable to the policy language. We feel that students should feel supported and engaged in their learning and their classroom, and we should view them holistically and allow them to have a life outside of school. To address the change we made in terms of adding manageable to the policy language, we added 2 new indicators of compliance. The first is that students report their instructional time is used purposefully and effectively. And evidence shows that student feedback informs adjustments to instructional pacing, structures, and classroom routines. The second indicator of compliance that we added is that school schedules are formulated with the intention of maximizing student input throughout the process and implemented in ways that reasonably align with student well-being and goals. The reasoning behind each of these changes is that student feedback revealed significant concerns about ineffective use of instructional time. Alongside racism and bullying being flagged as factors in chronic absenteeism, another large factor we heard was that students just felt their time wasn't worth going to class when they could do the same things as self-directed learning at home. We felt that if we are going to use purposefully in the language of the policy, then we should allow students to be a part of the voice that determines what purposefully looks like. Because previously it was just teachers and administrators determining what purposefully looks like in the indicators of compliance. Going back to James, one of the questions we asked in one of our listening sessions was, what is an example of a class you look forward to attending, or an example of a time that you really had fun in a class? And almost all had examples ready of whole class projects or instructional content relevant today, like mock trials or interactive simulations. And even students who said they were seniors and juniors had memories from 6th or 7th grade that they could just bring up at an instant. And we feel like this shows how impactful including class projects that students feel that are purposeful really are, because it sticks in their mind and it really formulates what they feel is a learning environment and makes them excited to learn. The second change we're making is the one surrounding school schedules, and this was around the discourse that happened surrounding students' recent experience with the schedule change. We want to first preface this by saying, as student reps and students in the listening sessions, everyone understands that the schedules have to adhere to legal requirements given by the states, as well as the teachers' requirements and needs. And largely the discourse wasn't about the actual schedule itself, but how students perceived that there was an absence of their voices in the process, and that the implementation felt misaligned with their well-being. Particularly the length of the fourth period block, or other things surrounding when school started, when school ended, when lunches were, etc. Students understand too that, there are limitations beyond just what they desire, but all they wanted was a seat at the table in a meaningful way that included ample student voice to collaborate and come up with a solution that works for everyone. So for this new indicator, we feel that it allows the district to be held accountable for effective schedule design with ample student participation throughout the development, and intentionally considering how certain schedule structures could impact student capacity to learn and thrive. Operationally, we hope our recommendations manifest in the district as classes being more interactive and adjusting based on student feedback. So class content being a collaboration between students and teachers regularly gathering student feedback, as well as school schedules in the future being developed through collaborative processes that include ample student and teacher input.
And I just want to add on for the operational impact, where we have encouraging teachers to gather student feedback. This is a policy that we saw from Yakima's student voice-centered policy, and that we thought was very helpful in trying to achieve the goals of these indicators and of this policy. Moving on to sub-policy 10.4, the main change that we have is in the policy language, and then we reflect it in interpretations and the indicators. This policy originally reads, ensure learning environments foster understanding, respect, and the development of pro-social student behavior, and we added at the end, while having established systems in place to discourage harmful and disruptive student behavior. We reflected this change in the policy by adding 2 parts of interpretation, one by defining harmful behavior to include bullying, harassment, cyberbullying, etc. And we took this definition, again, from other school districts that we looked at, specifically one in Massachusetts, the Boston School District. And we also defined established systems as defined people and processes that allow students to seek and receive timely, empathetic, and effective action to end that behavior and prevent its reoccurrence. In the indicators of compliance, we add to the student perception data to be in the top quartile for empathy, respect, and self-management, but specifically in peer-to-peer interactions. And we add an indicator, a 5th indicator, where student perception data from students who previously reported experiences of bullying or harm is at the top quartile in effectiveness of an administrator's response. Our reasoning behind these changes is that students reported that bullying, harassment, and discrimination frequently went unaddressed or were handled inconsistently. And it really goes back to one of the big themes that we saw, which was racism and bullying, and how that eroded their sense of safety and belonging, how that led to chronic absenteeism, how it discouraged them from going to school. Again, we can go back to the experience from that one student who was repeatedly bullied over 5 times, and nothing was done in their experience, or very little was done to prevent it. And we would really hope that these revisions create accountability, and by requiring these clearly defined systems for addressing harmful behavior, and that by specifying that these must be timely, empathetic, and effective, we hope to stop this harm in preventing recurrence. Because what we saw was that, yes, we want to promote student behavior, pro-social student behavior, but we frequently heard from students that there was nothing, or there was very little in their opinion that was really preventing the harmful behavior. Our operational impact that we envision these changes to have is that schools will have a clearly outlined plan and people to address bullying incidents, which are made clear and accessible to students. We heard from a student that they would go to an administrator or a teacher, and then they would just get redirected to another person. And there really was no outline plan, or they didn't really know who to go to address this issue. We also heard that schools don't track repeat offenders, and that teachers weren't really given the ample tools to effectively address bullying in their classrooms. And so we hope that the opposite happens, where we do track these repeat offenders, and that we provide these teachers the tools to prevent it, and to make sure that for these students, they have a sense of safety and belonging in their schools. And the third one is that we hope that bullying and harassment investigations are comprehensive and carried out with high levels of fidelity, with victims being informed about steps taken to investigate afterwards. Because, again, going back to the student experience that we heard and the student perspectives is, we heard that when they took out these investigations, they weren't comprehensive, and that it was simply just asking the student in question whether or not they did it. And students really didn't feel like they were carried out with high levels of fidelity and weren't really informed about what to do next. And so left them with more questions that they entered with.
Adding on to James, just for the last slide. I just wanted to reiterate, I think oftentimes when approaching students, admin or adults can approach from the perspective that students have a very one-sided worldview of just their desires and what they'd like to see in the school district. And reflected from our discussions, we see that students are very aware and also empathetic to the other limitations this district has in terms of, schedules and the legal compliance requirements. Or many students, even when talking about extremely harmful personal experiences like bullying or racism, or extremely punitive measures taken in classes for grading, they often spent lots of time addressing how the teacher must have felt in the situation, or how it must feel for a teacher to, try to wrangle a class of 30 students every single day. In terms of this, students understand that there is sometimes limited things that admin can do in handling bullying, and also that it's a very sensitive case from both sides. But to take something so personal and report it to administration and never hear back, even if the students don't reach the desired outcome in how their bully is handled, to just give them the affirmation that they will know what happens afterwards, or they will be informed on the steps taken to investigate, still makes a big difference. Going on to 10.5, sorry, okay. Going on to 10.5, we wanted this indicator to address the theme that we saw of students not feeling pride or comfort in their physical environment. So the original policy language says, ensure learning environments are designed and structured to promote student engagement, providing safe and equitable access to learning. What we realized is that physical needs being met in a dignified and accessible way are often a prerequisite to student engagement or learning. As James shared earlier, while it sounds funny, we can't expect students to focus in class or engage in class if they're worried about holding in their pee or where they're going to run to off campus when the bell rings to use the bathroom. We wanted to include in the policy language comfort and a sense of community pride, along with student engagement in learning environments. And within the interpretation, we added that not only do facilities, schedules, and instructional models engage students actively in learning, but they also meet their physical needs in a dignified and accessible environment. We want the district, or not just we want, but the students want the district to go beyond the bare minimum in, providing restrooms or providing communal spaces, and ensure that these restrooms are maintained in a way where students feel safe and comfortable going to them, or that there aren't other students that aren't in the bathroom for the purpose of using the bathroom loitering in there. Other things that would make any of us feel unsafe in using the restroom. To reflect the policy language in the indicators of compliance, we added physical environments to the perception data, as well as adding an additional indicator saying that student surveys and data reflect high levels of faith that physical environments will be improved in a timely and satisfactory manner where negative perceptions are present. We wanted to add this indicator because, like I said, students are very aware of the fact that our facilities staff works around the clock to keep district facilities as clean as possible and keep them in the best conditions possible, but inevitably there will be some gaps in the system. And what we really want is for students to be ensured that there is a process in place and it will be improved in a timely and satisfactory manner when these gaps are pointed out. Going back to the story we shared earlier about the student who had the wheelchair and then repeatedly had to advocate for getting that ramp fixed for her to be able to get into school, we wanted to emphasize that while we commend that student's commitment to reaching out to school officials, district officials, looking up the legal requirements on her own of what the ramp has to be, we don't want this to be the baseline for what all students have to do when they have an issue in their physical environment that doesn't meet their basic needs of comfort, dignity, or accessibility. So operationally, we hope that our policy changes translate into ensuring school areas like bathrooms, hallways, and cafeterias are clean and usable, but also creating outline plans for students to advocate for physical environment changes, and making sure those plans are accessible and clear to students, as well as ensuring transition time between students submitting these requests and implementing the changes is minimized.
And lastly, we're going on 10.7 because we skipped 10.6 because we thought it was already in a good place in terms of student voice, and didn't really hear much about 10.6 in our listening sessions. The two changes that we made to 10.7 was adding on to the definition of equitable and consistent grading to also mean is supportive of students' holistic needs. And to reflect this change in interpretation, we added to the indicators of compliance. Student survey data reflects that grading practices are clearly communicated, accessible, and responsive to student input, contributing to a learning environment that supports equitable engagement. our reasoning behind these two changes was that when we listened to these students, they highlighted two critical grading areas. One was that the rigid practices failed to account for the legitimate challenges that they faced in their experience, like family responsibilities, mental health needs, or for student athletes, student-sponsored athletic commitments. And the second issue was that there's significant inconsistency between teachers who teach the same course throughout the district and throughout the school. Students testified and described that the systems prioritize compliance over learning, and it undermined their motivation to learn. We heard from students, such as student athletes, where they described how they didn't have enough time to do the schoolwork, and the teachers weren't supportive of their needs and of the way they wanted to learn because they spend so much time doing these sports and having these other commitments. And it's not just in sports, but maybe you have a baby brother to take care of. Maybe you have a job because you need to help support your family. And there's so many different needs, and we really want to look at the holistic student and not just generalize, have one thing for everybody. The second thing that we noticed was that within the standards of grading and academics, there should be that reasonable flexibility. And operationally, we hope that this translates to that the grades are standardized across teachers teaching the same course, across the same school. What we heard from students was that between the same course, there'd be multiple teachers, and each teacher would have a different level of difficulty, or the amount of coursework they assigned would be different, and the amount of how harshly they graded would be different. And especially among schools within the same district, we would hear that like notoriously this course would be hard at this school. And we really think that these should be standardized across the district to make sure that it really is equitable for every student. We want teachers to be in control of their classwork. Obviously, we don't want the student to take over everything because the teachers have that experience and they have that expertise. But we want to like frame it in terms of Hart's ladder and move up Hart's ladder. And we want students to have a say in their own classwork and in their classes. This also translates to the second operational impact that we hope this policy change has, which is that grading practices aren't overly stringent or punitive towards late work or extenuating circumstances. Again, it ties back to the experiences that we heard from students about grading practices. And thirdly, that grading standards are created alongside students with their input, which is framed within Hart's ladder, and how we're really going to take student voice up a level. And so before we go into questions, I want to end with a closing remark and also just say that every single one of our recommendations were made with the context of our listening sessions and what we heard from these students and what we know as students, and how we really want to include student voice in OE10, the policy around students. As my closing remark, I'd like to say that I really hope that future student reps do this process too, because I think it's been very enlightening, and I think we've really learned a lot about students within the district. Again, as Sarah said, we're just 4 students in a district very large, and I really hope that we can help inform the future processes that will surround this process, because I think this is an important process to have.
Yeah, I want to echo what James said, but also say that, like I said, I don't know how many students are watching right now, but I think the biggest thing is that they put their faith in us and they actually opened up and shared experiences. I'm sure, I mean, just hearing a lot of these stories, they feel deeply personal. And the fact that they allowed students who they met for maybe 5 minutes over chips before to hear these stories and trusted us with them because they believed that we would empower their voice in a way that was meaningful. I hope, you know, the board and the district can further collaborate on these voices to reflect the work and, you know, just the work and the effort these students put into sharing their voices and do right by them in terms of, you know, moving up from that decoration level to actually informing our decisions and telling them that their voices do matter.
I want to echo what James and Suneri have said, but then I would just be echoing them. So instead, I'm just going to ask if anyone has any more questions.
Director Richter?
I apologize. I always have more questions. Are you sure no one else wants to go first while I figure out which one to ask first? Okay.
Director Meekhoff?
So this isn't really a question, but I just want to express my sincere appreciation and respect for the work that all of you have done and for just the students to come forward. And I think it says a lot about the four of you that they trusted you to convey their experiences. Yeah, I'm just super impressed. What I will say is that none of this surprised me, having two high schoolers who have experienced a myriad of things. So I'm saddened by some of it, but I think it's really important to talk about and think about as a board.
Director Liberty?
For OE 10.3, maybe go back a slide. There's a proposal to insert almost there. There you are. Insert the word manageable into the policy. I'm curious if you could expand upon to the students you talked with, like what does that mean? Like if you were to offer an interpretation of manageable, like what would that be?
Yeah, I'll start because James and I primarily work together on this change, and then I'll open up too if any of you guys want to add on. We first looked at the policy language before adding manageable and realized that purposeful and equitable could mean that, all the work is related to the content of the class and that everybody's getting the same work. But it could also mean that none of the students can handle the work, but you'd still be in compliance with the policy. So we didn't want it to reflect that type of environment. In our words, or in our interpretation, to me, manageable means not having overly, punitive consequences for work that is turned in late or may have extenuating circumstances, because we want to view students holistically. I think a lot of teachers do a good job at this, but also our education system as a whole sometimes leaves this out, that students are full people, especially at the high school level, with their own careers, extracurriculars, hobbies, dreams, families, everything outside of just school. And I'll give a specific example to highlight this. One student said that she has a single mother who has to pick her up every day and then drive her everywhere. She also has after-school practices. She also sometimes has to cook for herself at home. And when she turns an assignment in a day late, that teacher takes 30% off, just off the bat, for turning it in a day late. That's not manageable or respectful to a student's holistic, person and their family and their needs. So I'd say in my interpretation, I know manageable is often seen as like, oh, it's like easier, we can do it. But for us, I think manageable just means that it's not significantly adding to a student's stress in the way that they feel like they have to, give up other parts of their life that are meaningful to them, or not overly punitive when they do make mistakes.
If I could add a little bit on that, especially relating to, I think we're shifting away from a student or a teenager being every second of their day is just high school and nothing else. We're moving towards like extracurriculars are being so important. And instead of learning through schools, people are learning through the extracurricular activities, whether that's athletics, which has always been around, but there's so many more now, like robotics or clubs like DECA or HOSA or really anything that we can do to fill our time to learn without it being school. And so I think from our perspective, we should have a manageable learning environment because it allows for students to use their time for their creativity, for their hobbies. And I think there should be an importance placed on manageable. I'm not saying we should give students no homework or like no classwork or nothing. But again, reiterating what Suneri said, from what we heard, we heard a large majority of students saying that they wish it was more manageable in ways.
Director Yoakum?
I was going to say, I know I'm taking your spot. It's kind of a little bit off of Eric's, but I just want to first say amazing to the students and then the staff who you supported them, because I know just hearing them thank you as well shows how impactful what you did for them. But I am just proud of you. I am being able to sit alongside you and learn from you for the past 2 years, and this year it's making me want to really focus on how to improve this program, right, for our future student board reps. But it's very apparent from how the students quickly opened up to you that you created a very safe and comfortable environment. So that is kudos to you and the staff for helping to prepare that. I do have a question kind of a little bit like Eric's. It's on 10.4. I would have some concerns about adding disruptive student behavior without defining that. I think that can be potentially harmful if we don't define what disruptive means. So I am just curious, in your mind, when you're writing this and when you wrote that down, what did you mean when you said disruptive? The harmful, I can understand the harmful behavior and how you define that there, but curious disruptive student behavior.
I think there should be emphasis placed on how we described or how we define that. I think that is a good takeaway that I missed before. But from my experience and from what we heard, disruptive would mean basically like disrupting their learning or disrupting their engagement, a student's engagement. And so if there is behavior that is being disruptive or it is preventing students from engaging, other students from engaging, I think that would be my broad definition of disruptive. But I think it is key to define it and make sure we're not being overly broad about what that means.
Yeah, adding on to James, I think that was a good thing to flag, that a lot of the time disruptive student behavior can be a sign of many other things, sometimes that students can't control, and we don't want to punish that. But yeah, I think when we chose to add the word disruptive alongside harmful, it just meant anything that was disrupting a specific student's ability to learn in that class. So while it might not necessarily be characterized as like bullying, because bullying is often seen as like a repeated offense, just something that stops a student from being able to learn. But I think we can workshop that language further because we don't want it to unintentionally single out someone who like feels targeted by a policy that's not meant to target them.
Director Richter, ready?
Director Yoakum stole my question, which was to define disruptive, so appreciate the answer. So I'll go on to my next one instead, which might not be as much a question, but I'm going to work through this. Bear with me. I really appreciated everything that you've brought forward, but I was especially interested in 10.4, which luckily is right on the screen right now. Because before I was elected, I remember watching sessions about the changes that were going into OE10, and this one in particular, I remember there was an entire discussion about student behavior, and well, maybe we shouldn't encourage all student behaviors. A little funny, but also true, and I appreciate you calling this out on this particular one very clearly. So that's a personal thing. I like this. And then beyond that, the bathrooms. Bathrooms came up, weirdly enough, a lot when I was knocking doors during the campaign, and given the amount that there's only so many doors you can knock during a campaign, and the fact that they came up multiple times is interesting. But I would actually now going to bring it back to Hart's Ladder, which I was looking at the information you gave. I'll read through it more later. But I get the understanding this was designed to measure youth participation. I think it's could be generalized to talk about any participation in our district, really. And so What I was hearing on the campaign trail was just parents being very concerned about the issue too. Just like, I'm not minimizing anything you're saying, I'm just saying other people are feeling it too. And I accidentally knocked the head custodian of one of the high schools on the campaign trail, and she gave me an earful about bathrooms and whether there's enough staff and whether custodial is consulted so that they have enough resources to clean them. And so I just really love that you pulled in Hart's Ladder and that concept of consulting definitely students, but then generalizing all the people who are affected. Okay, I know that wasn't a question, that was me soapboxing, but thank you for letting me go through that. As far as actual questions, no, I'm soapboxing, I'm done.
Director Meekhoff?
I just have a quick wonder when we're talking about manageable. Something that comes to mind for me is academic workload that students are choosing. Have you talked about that at all? Like when in my household we're talking about like APs, like is it manageable to take 5 APs? Like is that good? Was that discussed at all in your groups?
Yeah, we did talk about that, especially because a lot of us have taken so many APs, and we know going into a class, like, sometimes it's to be expected. Like, for example, at Redmond AP Lang, when you take that class, the teachers will first come to you and tell you, this is an incredibly difficult course, you need to go into it knowing that this might have to be the only AP you take. And so we did talk about that. We discussed, should we add this, or is it expected that the students should be able to manage whatever classes they decide to take on? Because it's not like you're forced to take AP Lang and then 4 other APs. The teachers tell you not to do that, and still so many students do. But then we went back to the mission statement for Lake Washington School District, which mentions that every student should be future ready, and that means being prepared for college. And in this day and age, being prepared for college means that you need to take this many APs a lot of the time. Like, it's just getting so competitive that for most students, especially going into junior year, they didn't feel like it was an option to just take 1 or 2 APs. Especially our district is so academically competitive that I didn't even think I had an option to not take at least 4. Like, I think I'm even behind compared to my peers who are taking 5 APs. So if, like, Lake Washington, we thought, like, if Lake Washington School District's, like, mission is to make sure that every student is college ready, and if that currently means taking this many APs, and that I think that the students who are taking this many APs, which is a big portion of our students, they should feel like they are being supported because it's really difficult. And if it feels like the district, if it feels like the district does not care that students, like some of the classes are this difficult, and the student just has to sit there and take it and stay up late and pull all-nighters, then I think that it's even more difficult. Like, students already have to do so much, and then on top of that, if there's no rules around what is manageable, then it's even more difficult. So that's why we decided to include that word.
Yeah, I'll just add on to this really quickly, and then I'll go to Hamsini. James Hamsini and I actually met with the, I'd say accelerated programs?
Director of accelerated programs.
Director, I'm not sure. I know she works at the high school level for accelerated programs primarily, but like all 3 of them work together, and she asked us a lot about our experience with APs. And I think what Sarah is speaking to is largely a culture issue that we see sometimes where students feel overly stressed too. Like she said, she didn't know that she had even the option to not take those. And, we often hear counselors say statements like, you'll have high course rigor marked on your transcript if you take this number of APs. And that is a culture issue that maybe we can't fully resolve through this policy, but the intention of this policy, especially given that courses like AP are, their content is determined by College Board, not by teachers. It's not like teachers want to overburden students, but it's just how much they have to, teach to prepare students for that class. But it's rather for policies that the teachers do have control over, lightening the load where it's reasonable to lighten that load. So for example, if your kid is taking an AP, that AP is probably already a lot of work. that they have to work to cover in September through May before the exam. It's not going to be helpful in some cases to have overly punitive measures like we mentioned earlier. Then about 70% of your grade, 30% of your grade being taken off for being a day late. All that does is reduce motivation for students or make them feel like the district itself defined earlier, students should feel like a strong sense of self-efficacy. And that just reduces your sense of self-efficacy when you feel like even when you're trying to keep up with everything, you're getting, a C or lower. And we feel like manageable just means that when it's possible for teachers to do that, they're not creating policies that unnecessarily create this stress. It's not that we shouldn't hold students accountable. It's not that we shouldn't make them future ready and encourage high course rigor or encourage accountability for their grades, but it's rather partnering with them in a way that we can give them strategies and provide them a mental space where they're excited or motivated or able to take on this course rigor without feeling like they're drowning. Hamsini, you wanted to add?
I don't really have anything much to add. James Sunieri and I did meet with Miss Theresa Burden, I believe that was her name, and we did talk about different levels of advanced courses like Running Start, College in the High School, and APs, and that's all I just wanted to add because I think Sunieri did a great job in explaining.
I'd also like to add that we formulated these recommendations from the listening sessions, and I don't remember, at least to the schools I went to, not even one student said that the courses that they were currently taking were manageable. And we were talking to students who were taking a variety of different courses, students who weren't even taking AP courses. They just didn't feel like they had enough time within school hours to finish all the work they were given. So since we formulated these recommendations from the listening sessions, and so many students said that there needed to be something done regarding the level of coursework given, we had to include something which manifests in that word over there.
If I could just add something really quickly on to the original comment, it's that a lot of times we're adding manageable because we heard that not all students are doing school to be college ready. When we're redefining R2, it's not just college ready at this point. I think we've evolved from just being high school is going to college, like this linear pathway. When we're making it manageable, we're allowing students to take extracurriculars, to be able to explore other opportunities. It's not their entire life. I still remember a point in the United States and in other countries where school is 100% of your time. And what it does, it makes your pathway really linear, and it really sets this one definition for success. And I think as a district, the work that we've been doing has been pertaining to expanding this definition of success. Because why should success of all high school students be defined by one pathway? And I think it shouldn't. And what we heard from students is that it shouldn't. And so I don't think we're making it manageable just so students do less work, but it's to help them explore other pathways, have them have time that isn't schoolwork to do, other things as teenagers. And I think that's what we're providing. We're providing this opportunity for these students.
Director Richter?
That was all amazing. And as a parent of a high school student who does not find the work manageable and does not have time for the extracurriculars and clubs that would probably expand the student's life, thank you for saying it all. And honestly, we have plenty of students with a 504 or IEP who get 50% time on their classwork, so it seems odd not to extend the same courtesy to someone who just has sports or a job or life situation. So, no, thank you for saying what you've said.
Director Liberty.
For the policy 10.7, there's a proposed new indicator of compliance for student survey data generally. And the things that were listed in there, that said they would reflect grading practices that are clearly communicated, accessible, and responsive to student input. And then I would say another one is contributing to learning environment. Those things that you're asking the survey data to measure, does that capture sort of the values that you heard from students on what they would like to see in grading practices? Or how did you arrive at those words, I guess?
Like James said, we looked at a lot of other school districts' policies when creating our own. Like, for example, for the bullying policy, the reason we chose Boston School District, or it might have been a specific school district in Boston, but not specifically Boston School District, but it was because many of their students and a lot of their rankings reported that they had like severely reduced incidents of bullying because of this new language. So part of this language was based off other places where we saw like students reported being satisfied, but the reason we chose clearly communicated, accessible, and responsive to student input was stories we shared. Like, first of all, clearly communicated means that, you know, students, it's not just in a syllabus you hand out at the beginning of the year. Like, no one's keeping the one-page syllabus on them at all times. So it's in a place where students can see it. It's in Canvas. It's very clear what this teacher expects of the student. In terms of accessible, I think that's similar, but also accessibility in a broader definition of like all students are reasonably able to achieve those grading standards, you know? So it's not like this insane grading standard where only someone that has like hours to dedicate to their life outside of school would be able to get a grade that they consider proficient in that class. And then responsive to student input is probably the main one we heard feedback on, just because we know that, you know, teachers and staff can't read our minds and they have their own context for the policies they create. And no one's expecting that to happen, but it's the same with the physical environment policy, where all students want is that when we do identify gaps or things that aren't working for us, that somebody cares enough to listen and actually try to take action on that. So responsive to student input doesn't even necessarily have to mean that the teacher changes their grading practice because of one student's thing, but it means that the student is aware and has the faith that that teacher considered it and maybe went over with that student why they're not making that change. So the student's at least receiving a response. And that's the same thing we outlined in our bullying policy, where students understand that maybe a bullying situation is not always resolved the way they want, but to provide that student a response and tell them what steps were taken and why something is happening is often like powerful in itself. So I'd say from what we heard from students in terms of grades being holistic to student needs, so accessible to them and achieving that grade, and also responsive to when students bring up that, you know, I had an extenuating circumstance last night, or I can't do this, or overall this class is like becoming strenuous because of this grading practice. They want it to be responsive, accessible, and clearly communicated.
Onto the school district that we took, the language for harmful behavior, we really just like weren't super particular in what we were just struggling to find a good definition for what harmful behavior was. And we know that Massachusetts has a really good public school system, so I looked up best schools in Massachusetts and then just took their definition for harmful behavior. But on to 10.7, I think also the intent was, when I personally reflect on my experience with Running Start, at Bellevue College, at the end of every single course, they have some sort of mandatory form that they send to every student taking a class, and the student will fill it out, rating how prepared the professor was, how responsive they were. And while I don't think we should make this mandatory for teachers to have, I think it is a good indicator when you have professors or when you have teachers who are being like explicitly responsive to student input, who care about student input enough to have this feedback survey at the end of each class. And I just think that maybe not specifically having that implemented operationally, but having the intent of what the survey represents as collecting student input and collecting student voice.
Kind of following on to that question, because you mentioned multiple times that students didn't really feel like they had a voice across many different, you know, just speaking about grading, but really, I think across this whole policy, that came through loud and clear. Did you hear things from students about how they would like to be engaged, or what are means that are effective? I think that's a great example in that particular realm. And maybe it is sort of realm by realm, or maybe there's not sort of the Uber survey of, you know, that's gathering student input, or the mechanism. But did you have any insight into how we as a board and as a district could be more effective at that?
I'll start, and then you guys definitely add on. I think it's kind of funny how after almost every single listening session we did, and I think Ms. Adana and Mr. Sergio can like testify to this, we had at least 1 or 2 students come up after every session and say, how can I become a student rep? And while I like definitely appreciate and value like the voice I was given to advocate for so many students, I also realize how amazing it would be if every student in our district was empowered to advocate at that level. And I'm not saying let's have 30,000 student reps at the board meeting or on the dais, but I'm saying not that you should actually do this, but I think it would be funny to see, like, if we went into a school and just surveyed like high schoolers or asked them randomly, do you know what public comment is? Do you know what OEs are? Like, I don't know what an OE is. Do you know like what the things that make up your day-to-day life and what determine what you're entitled to as a student are? I think majority of them would say no. So it's not even necessarily that we don't have things in place to enhance student voice right now, but sometimes it's that we haven't educated students enough about it, that, you know, that's not being used in a meaningful way. Like for the schedule, I know that was like a hot button topic, and I can say that Dr. Holman did make an effort to send out surveys, and whoever was conducting the schedules, you know, committee did make an effort to send out surveys, but it didn't reach the students, and that's what matters. So I think students want to be heard in a way that many of us have the opportunity to be heard. I think when I come into this room, I feel like my voice is valued, and everyone in this room makes me feel very supported. And I think for students to have a space where they feel that way, whether it's just educating them about public comment or making the committees we have more known and accessible, or maybe starting student rep programs within certain schools and say, okay, like, you're the assigned student rep for this school, tell us what you think. That would be good, especially because this presentation just reflects the thoughts of high school students, but we know that there's a much greater student population out there that we don't have the thoughts of right now. So yeah, I'd say that just given the interest we had in being a student rep, after every listening session, if there was some way we could make students feel as empowered as the 4 of us feel, that would be amazing.
So, yes, whatever Suneri said, but on top of that, students always asked us when we were going to come back and if we were going to come back, because they were very interested in knowing what we would do with their voices. They're very used to their voices being heard and then nothing happening from that. So I think that's kind of the sentiment that students have about public comment, is that when I did ask them, like, do you know that you can come over and speak for public comment, they thought that it was some sort of sham, because they thought, okay, I will go and speak, but since the board doesn't speak to me directly during public comment, they feel like it's for decoration, it's just a show, and nothing will actually come from their voice being heard. It's a waste of their time. And I know that the board, I think, does reach back to the people who gave public comments, but I think that if there's a way for students to give their voice and in return they're given maybe a meeting or at least a virtual meeting, then they would feel a lot more comfortable with sharing their opinion.
Adding on to what Suneri and Sarah said about really knowing what we as student reps do and how to really communicate with the board. I feel like it would be really beneficial and I think amazing if students knew what public comment, like going up there, can do, and really realizing that their voice and opinion mattered at public comment, even if the board doesn't give a response to them while they are commenting. And also, while visiting schools, a lot of the students didn't really know what a student body rep was. And the fact that we are representing the students, I feel like it's important to really share who we are to the students. And I'm not sure how, but I feel like it's just an important thing that we should really share as students ourselves.
And I just want to add this very quickly. This is more personal, but I never heard of a student rep before I applied. And I only heard of it because right before the application deadline, my dad said that he found some email and he asked me if I was interested in applying. But I always think about that. If my dad had not shown me that email at the last minute and I hadn't written my application really fast, thoughtfully, but fast, then I would not be here right now and I wouldn't have gotten all these opportunities. And I think that this opportunity should be given, like, so many more students should be allowed to apply for this opportunity, and they do want to apply, but since this is not more public, a lot of students felt like they weren't even given this opportunity to even apply to become a student rep in the first place. Like, I know a lot of students were upset that when I let them know, like, you have to apply in sophomore year, they had no idea you had to apply in sophomore year, but they would have been so interested to do so. So I think that as a board, and we can work with you guys, like as the student representatives, we need to advertise being a student rep more. We need to advertise what public comment can really do more, and maybe even create a different way that students can be able to share their voice and then get a reaction back from us. Like, I know on the dais we're not able to do that, but if we could come up with something else where students can feel more heard when they're sharing their opinion, because it takes a lot to share your voice, and then for them to just stare back at you, it's really difficult. So, yeah.
Yeah, that was great. If I could add something on, I think connecting student reps and making that more accessible to grading practices. I don't think we should, I think we should be encouraging everybody to apply to be a student rep. Obviously, not everybody can, but I think we should be allowing students to take agency and take at least a little bit of control of the grading practices that are defining their grades. Just like we're on the student rep helping define the policies that shape this district, I think, again, connecting to our recommendation is that these grading practices should be communicated, accessible, and responsive to student input, just like what we're doing here, but maybe we just allow students at least to take control of their grading practices, if not, district policy.
Director Richter.
Thank you. I was looking back through my notes and I realized I'm not sure about this one. Sorry, different track from what we were just talking about. When you were saying that students were expressing concerns about ineffective use of instructional time, could you elaborate, keeping confidential, a little bit more if that was about the schedule this year or just a general thing? You said they were concerned that they could essentially do the same learning at home and in a quicker amount of time. So if you can just elaborate.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The way we heard that was students would come to class and then they'd be given a packet at the beginning of class, and then the rest of class they'd spend working on that packet. And I think it's hard enough to wake up at like 8 in the morning to get to school, but if you're going to wake up at 8 in the morning to get to school and first period is just 80 minutes of doing a packet that you could have slept in, printed out at home and done, then I can't say I can't relate to that feeling of what am I coming here for? Like, I think, yeah, there's a certain level of you can go up to the teacher and ask questions, but like we said earlier, the bright spots in the district where students have great memories are the ones where like they did like a Genghis Khan mock trial where they put Genghis Khan on trial, or their teacher like inserted memes in the middle of their math PowerPoints to make it more relatable to understand. It's not when you're coming to school and doing the packets. So if your question was like, why do they feel that it's not effective, or what can we do?
Just wanted to understand better what was meant by that, because I could envision that means that half the class time wasn't used for an instruction, or that there was disruption. There were a lot of things I could see being there.
Yeah, so I think by like students report that instructional time is used purposefully and effectively, it means that that time itself that we've allotted to tell them like you need to be here, it's used in a way that it's effective, that you couldn't do that like on your own or somewhere else, or rush a packet within 15 minutes and finish that. Like there's a reason why we have 80 minutes of that period, and all the students need to be together, and all the teacher needs to be there, or the teacher needs to be there. That's what it means to me. So I also think that our biggest problem with 10.3 originally was not with the like language as just as much as like who was defining what purposeful meant, because originally the indicators didn't really have student voice and purposeful. And I know a big like way that we get data on students is Panorama, because it's just not realistic to go and survey 30,000 students. So this would just look like a Panorama question, like, do you feel like when you go to class your time is used purposefully? Do you feel like when you go to class your time is used effectively? Things like that.
Yeah, I just wanted to share a personal experience on what we mean by like interactive. In my AP World class, we did this really fun and really interactive like simulation that explored how trading worked and how different nations had different resources and how that made them more powerful or more weak, or how that trading worked. And I can tell you that 2 years ago, I can remember that activity. And I cannot tell you any single written packet or assignment that I did that year. Like, I could not tell you a single piece. And I think it's important that we place an emphasis on having this collaboration, this peer-to-peer activity, having this be fun and engaging, because that's how I think people learn, is through engagement. And so it goes back to, if you're just coming to school to do independent work, why are students coming to school? I think it connects to chronic absenteeism. So.
And this might be going a little bit on the tangent, but I just wanted the board to know this, and just like the district to hear this. But this came up when we were asking the questions of what would you change about your school to make you attend more? Or when you asked why do you skip some classes, the majority of the time students answered that the reason that they skipped classes is because some classes were just skippable, because all you have is a packet. Now that's a skippable class. I can go home, print that packet, finish it. So when the district, I was there for the day we were talking about chronic absenteeism. And if we want to address that, I think it's important that we address the underlying issue of why students are skipping in the first place. And a lot of that reason of why they're just skipping specific classes is because, as the student says, that there needs to be more engaging activities. In most classes, we are just reading from a book or a computer, and the staff could engage in a more positive way. And so, yeah, that's why I think that that's one of the reasons that we were focusing so much on making the classes engaging, not just so that the students maybe pay attention more, but also so that they even come to class in the first place.
Director Yoakum?
I have a question for Dr. Holman. May I ask you this question? It's about Hart's Ladder. It's the first time I've heard of Hart's Ladder, and it's fascinating, and I know it's also used here, just been looking at student board reps, but you referenced it several times in these policies, the sub-policies, and implementing it in these. I'm just wondering, is our staff aware of Hart's Ladder, and is this a tool that can be used to work with improve collaboration between students and educators?
So I was introduced to Hart's Ladder on Thursday of last week, and so I'll ask Johnny if it's been used in other places. It's not too dissimilar from other engagement frameworks or kind of spectrum concepts related to engagement, public participation, things like that. And this one is specific to students. And so
we specifically chose Heart's Ladder based off of the data and the themes that were coming up. And what we wanted to do was be able to frame it in a way that made sense. And one of the biggest common themes that was coming up was like student participation. And, you know, there's, like Dr. Holman says, it's a continuum. And one way to do it is really Heart's Ladder. And there's quite a bit of research behind it. And we wanted to think about other local or regional or state level agencies or youth groups that are using it. Oftentimes Heart Ladder is used in youth development, but you can apply it to educational settings as well. One of the things I just want to provide a little bit context to, and I'm just really super proud of you all, and this is why you spent 40 plus hours doing this work, is our student board rep looked at more than 300 data points. I just like want that to like sit for a little while. Over 300 specific experiences of young folks who openly shared. And so I'm just super impressed of how much time you spent and the care that you brought to bring those stories forward, and the intentions that you were that you put towards making your recommendations, and it shows. And I just wanted to say, it's just like it really demonstrates, and I, for all the students who are listening, I think they would be extremely proud of what you brought forward.
Can we make sure that the students who participated get a link to this recording, ideally coming from you all, because you're the ones who really did the work and who have carried their voice into this room. And yes, I will echo what everybody else has said. It's just that's really powerful.
I think, I don't know if this is like set in stone yet, but I think we wanted to go back to the respective schools that we visited. So James and I did the listening sessions together, and Sarah and Hamsini did the listening sessions together, and we split up the schools. And we wanted to go back to the schools where we presented, just because not only did we know the kids and like kind of who said what and what the context surrounding specific concerns were, but also we started every single listening session off by asking the question, how much faith do you have that your voice in this listening session will make a difference? And we promised all of them that we are going to do our best on our end to make an actual change, and we are going to, you know, take their concerns to the district. So I think we all just want to go back and tell them personally that this was like a real presentation that happened, and they can then ask us specific questions based on what they brought up in their listening sessions and whether that was brought up to the board.
Any other questions? No? Any last comments from our student reps?
I want to say thank you again. Wait, I actually appreciate it a lot. Like, I have personal thank yous for everyone. Director Fu puts in a lot of energy. Like, he just always has a smile on his face. And sometimes, like, we didn't want to be there or wake up or come after school. But I feel like you don't realize how much, like, your excitement for this makes us excited. He also went and got us bags of Cheeto fries, like, 3 times. And he came to our schools to get our Mendocino Farms order. So he really goes the extra mile. Miss Adana, same thing. I feel like you're just like such a happy person, and you're so relatable. I feel like we talked about a lot how like the students created a space for students in listening sessions to open up, but I feel like you created a space for all of us to open up. And I really appreciate that. And I like when you come to Eastlake and I see you and it's like a friendly face. And Mr. Sergio is definitely one of the funniest people working at the district I've met. And sometimes he has interesting ideas for what to name things. But he always has a good sense of humor, and I feel like he's a really good balance between like getting work done and keeping things fun. And all 3 of you just made the process so manageable and just made it feel like something I'm really excited to do in the future. And Dr. Peter, who isn't here, she also kept track of all the snacks that we wanted. She let us use her office. She had gummy bears. She had Lindor, and I think we used up all her napkins eating Cheeto fries. So yeah, all of you guys were so amazing, and I just really hope we get to see each other in the future and work together.
Dr. Holman has a question.
So my question is about what did you learn about the process of concept or an idea and then seeing it all the way through to tonight? Because if I remember correctly, there was some nervous energy right before the listening session. So I would love to hear, what did you learn about leadership, process, planning from this?
I guess I'll go first. Since I kind of did the process slide, I feel like I know slightly kind of how to explain it. I also would like to thank Director Fu and Ms. Adana, Mr. Sergio, and Dr. Peter for making this process extremely welcoming. Like when we were working together, always bringing a smile to your guys' face, made it feel like it was a comfortable environment to really express and showcase our ideas as a team. And as a process, I really think that there were so many steps that were taken, and it just really shows that I'm not really sure how to word this, but I'm sorry, can you please get back to me? I don't know.
If I could share something, it's that I don't think we got to everybody that we should have. And I think being the first year of doing this, there were definitely some hurdles that I think we can recommend if we do this in later years. Being the four of us or even like the district staff can help refine this process. I will say though, like apart from the snacks and everything, we could not have done this process without all the help that we got from the district. And when I think about it in Hearts Ladder, although we got help, I really appreciate how much was focused on us, how we formulated the questions, how we went through the recommendations as students. And while they did facilitate it, like we really put our mouth, like, I don't know, like we're preaching this like framework, and I really saw it in use through this process. As for what I learned, I think is that we are just four people trying to encapsulate every single perspective, and it's really hard to get every perspective. And I don't know how the district does it because this took us 40 hours. That was really, really hard. So, and I don't think this work was like, there's so much work in the district, and I really appreciate it. And I think it planted in my mind how hard this process is. And I don't think people understand how hard this process is. And I just really appreciate that we went through this hard process. And I hope we do it in future years. And I really appreciate that we took the time to get to students. And again, we should get to more students.
One thing I've learned is just how time consuming this really is. I remember when we finally finished the listening sessions and we had all of our data, and I was so ready to just make my PowerPoint. And I thought I would just look at like the data and I'd control F it and go through it, and I would be like, okay, so it says too much work like 5 times here, so I should write 5 times. And then we got to work with a data analysicer, Mr. Taylor, and we had so much support, and it still took us forever to get through that data. And then when we were finally done with that data, it took us forever to sort through it and think what we wanted to do with that data. We had to come up with our themes. That also took forever. And I just want to say, like, to everybody who puts in this much time and work to help our district run all the time, I have no idea how you guys do it. And honestly, thank you just for putting in this much work for our district. On top of that, I also want to thank Director Fu, Ms. Adana, Mr. Sergio, and Dr. Peter for all this support. I sometimes, like, this is a secret, but sometimes when I'm at the board meetings, I don't know what they're saying. It's so complex, and sometimes I get some imposter syndrome. I think that's what you call it, when you're there and you're really wondering, like, I don't understand anything that's going on right now. Like, am I supposed to be here? But all the adults in this experience have made me feel so supportive. And for example, I was at school one day and then I got a text that Miss Arana and Mr. Sergio were at my school, and then I went and I was scared. I was like, oh no, like what are we gonna do? Like, was I supposed to like prepare or something today? And then I went and they asked me what they can do to make me feel more confident for the meeting, or how I can how they can help me take care of myself so I don't feel afraid when I'm presenting. And I've never been asked that. Like, I've never been asked what can I do to help you feel less afraid during the presentation. Like, I just thought that's something you have to deal with. And I was really afraid, actually, but I tried to, like, I told them I don't need anything. Like, I tried to play it cool. I was like, yeah, I'm really good. I'm not going to be afraid at all. But just them asking me, I think that reassured me that it was a big deal. I think still is a big deal to present in front of all of these, like, big people. But I think I still feel way more comfortable that they went out of their way to ask me, like little me, how they could help me feel less afraid. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you to Director Fu for my Cheeto fries. I mentioned that once and I had them the next day. I'm so thankful.
And my Pringles.
And Dr. Peter, who's not here, but yeah.
I don't know what they're saying half the time either, Sarah. Sorry. Humsini, did you were you ready to say something?
I guess I just kind of wanted to go an overview of all we've went through since we started this process, and I'm really just want to say I'm really appreciative for the people that I've thanked so far, as public speaking is kind of one of my fears, and I do get nervous, but I'm really appreciative about the time that we had to prep and really practice. So a little bit of that nervousness is kind of gone. And I really appreciate also the other student reps in helping me have more confidence. And I really appreciate their feedback and their opinions that they bring to their table. And so kind of moving on to like the overview like process, like starting all the way in like, I'm pretty sure like November, like to visiting the schools and really interacting with the students and taking time off just to visit them and hear their opinion. And I really do appreciate that we do take time and listen to the students and really hear their perspective. And I'm kind of glad that this is the outcome of where we started here now in February. So I'd just like to say that.
Did you have something else, Jane? No, you were just...
Wait, I forgot. Let's see. I think I have like 100 times more appreciation for everybody's job in this room.
That's what I was gonna say.
I think I used to find it funny that like we have to set the school schedules like 15 years in advance, and it takes so long to do everything. And I was like, oh, if it were me, like I could make a schedule in one day, and everybody would love it. And now I'm making a policy recommendation. And, I think it's a great sign that we take that long to do it, because it shows like how comprehensive our processes are as a board, and like the high fidelity we do these things with. But I think everybody in this room, if you've ever felt underappreciated, just know that I have very great appreciation for all that you do and all the things that are behind the scenes that maybe students or parents or other community members don't see, but I see it now.
That's funny, 'cause I was gonna say the exact same thing. We've like thanked Director Fu and all the district staff, but the process really made me appreciate everybody else in this room and all the central leadership and even like teachers and all the staff in our district, because I wish someone would have told me it took this long, because I did not think it was going to take this long. And I think it really opened my eyes to, it's like what Suneri said. I thought it'd be easy, and it wasn't. And I think a lot of people can think that way, and it really opened my eyes to see how much work. And I don't think we all have the same 24 hours because it seems like the district has so much work. So I really appreciate that.
Adana.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you all for being here. I know you have to be here, but I really appreciate y'all for being here. I really want to especially thank you for, like, y'all don't understand how proud I am of y'all. Like, from the moment we worked together till now, and we'll continue to work together, I just really, really am proud of all of you. Like, the work that we had to do, like, each and every one of you made it so much fun. Like, it was a lot. And there are times where y'all, I could tell in your face, you did not want to keep working. But I'm so thankful for y'all, seriously. And, like, seeing y'all in the listening sessions, building that trust with the students, being able to work with them, the connection really matters a lot. And I hope y'all know just how much your voices matter, too. Like, the fact that you're here, the fact that you're able to share their stories and everything, I know how much they would love this and how much they would care about this, and just really appreciating just all the work they put into it. I know how hard it was, but I'm just really thankful. Like, just the time we got to spend together, like, you know, laughing it up, you know, working hard, locking in and everything, but also having a good time and everything. I really appreciate that. And y'all teach me a lot of stuff, you know, like, I really love that too. I mean, it's just great. And so I just want y'all to know, like, how proud I am. Y'all did that, and it's just great. So.
Yeah, and I had an inkling of what I was getting y'all into. Having done user research as part of my job, it is a lot, and it is absolutely vital. And I knew that I and none of us could go into a room and get the kind of feedback that the four of you could. And that's why we put this on you. Probably should have prepped a little better just in terms of, like, this is coming. But I'm glad to hear you say that even without sort of getting that up front, that you have walked away and have felt that it's a really valuable experience. Because I won't speak for the other four directors, but this has been absolutely incredible. The voices that you've brought into this room, the perspectives that you've brought, and it's just, this is, I think we can probably all agree that our student reps just went a couple rungs up on Hart's ladder compared to, you know, where we've been and what we've done before. So thank you for engaging, for putting in the time, because it matters. And yes, thank you so much. And thank you to all the staff who supported, because it was a lot on you too. And knowing, I mean, I know that you have this expertise though, and this is stuff that you do all the time. And so being able to combine all of your knowledge with the knowledge of our student reps and the passion of our student reps, this is like more than everything that I could have hoped for. So thank you. With that, well, if I can find my paper that tells me what to say. Since there are no other agenda items, the February 9th, 2026 study session is now adjourned at 6:48 p.m.